Oh my gosh. Okay, it says we're live, so we must be. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for coming to class today. Today, we're going to have a really candid conversation about how do I get help for my PTSD. So we've got a presentation for you. We want to have some live Q&A. So let's just jump into this because I hate being late. Full disclosure. So I have a dog the size of a human here. So if you hear some barking, that's how life goes. So I'm really looking forward to connecting with you. We're going to have a pause for questions, and let's just go ahead and jump in. So I'm going to go ahead and try to leap into the 90s here. Don't worry, I have technical help. Nicole and Katie are in the background, so don't worry. I promise you, I'm not alone and unafraid on this. I have a lot of help, thank God. So let me go ahead, share my screen with you, and let's just get started. All right. So share screen. All right. It's going to get wonky before it gets better. So share. Okay. Patience. This is going to have to be a no judgment class on the technology side. So here we go. Boom. All right. That's awesome. All right. Oh, okay. So my hope is that you, hopes abated. Okay. So there we go. All right, team. So thank you so much for coming to class today. So today, as advertised, we're going to have a really candid conversation that's going to answer the question, how do I get help for my PTSD? So how do I do the thing that I most need to do in order to recover? And the reason for this class is pretty simple. So many times in PTSD and in life, we know we need to make a change because it's the best thing for us. And implementation is really tough. So the goal of this class is to get you the tools that you need to get from point A to a point B. Let's see. We're gonna, bam! Look at me. I'm feeling pretty full of myself. Not because my picture's on the screen, but because I actually managed to forward the slide. But give me time to disappoint you. So I'm Virginia. I'm a licensed professional counselor. I'm a combat veteran, and I'm the author of the book, The Soldier's Guide to PTSD, which is available in audiobook, ebook, and paperback wherever fine books are sold. And let's go ahead and jump in. So we're going to go ahead and just get started. So the first thing we're going to do is look at something that we call the big two questions. In order to recover from PTSD, moral injury, we need to get honest with ourselves. So we need to ask and answer some really tough questions that we're going to call the big two. So you and I are going to walk through this process together. We're also going to address some elephants in the room, mainly, how do I get my loved ones to get help? And also, what if I'm on the fence about getting treatment? So this section of our class is going to be two sections. This section of our class is going to take about 10 minutes. And then I want to hit pause, open it up to questions before we move into the second section, where we're going to cover the no kidding brass tacks of how do I find a therapist to help me? Okay, so let's get started. So here's your trigger warning. You're probably not going to like a lot of what I'm about to say, but you might need to hear it. So in order to recover from PTSD or moral injury, we need to start with a really honest conversation about our fundamental belief systems. So we're going to ask the big two questions. That's one, do I believe change is possible? And two, do I want to change? So these are the big two questions that we need to ask and answer in a brutally honest way before we start our recovery journey. So let's go ahead and start with question one. So we need to ask ourselves, do I believe that it's possible that I can recover from my PTSD symptoms and no joke, reclaim my life? Now we know that that's what we want, But this is a very different question. We have to ask, do I believe that this is possible for me? So we can go ahead and expand on this. Okay. Is it possible? We're not asking if we want this. You're not asking if we're going to do the thing. We're just asking, is it possible that I can get to a point where I'm not thinking about my PTSD every day, where I'm not feeling suicidal anymore every day? Is it just possible? Is it possible that I'm a good person and that my symptoms are tricking me into thinking that I'm not? Is it possible that I can learn to understand myself, maybe forgive myself? So we have to be very honest about this and ask, do I believe that change is possible for me? Now, I realize that these questions, frankly, they're not easy to answer. But I recognize also that you might be yelling back at the screen right now and say, Virginia, you don't understand where I've been. You don't understand what I've done, how it happened, and you don't get it. And here's the thing. You are correct. You're absolutely right. I have not walked your walk. So what I'm asking you to do is have a brutally honest talk with yourself and just ask, do I believe that change is possible for me? Now, question 2, this is a lot harder because we have to ask and answer. Do I want to recover from PTSD? And moreover, am I willing to do the work that it's going to take? Do I want this badly enough to get out of my comfort zone, to do something difficult and draining? Because no joke, that's what it's going to take to get better. So let's get real. Choosing to go through PTSD treatment, it involves a lot of risk because successful treatment requires, number one, working with another person. You can't be alone and unafraid on this. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a bit. You have to work with a licensed treatment professional, and we have to choose to be authentic with them. Now, I'm not going to bullshit you. I'm not going to deny that this is hard work, and there's a lot of fear in exposing our truth to another person. We can really feel fear of judgment, fear of reliving the trauma, fear, period. Just put a point on that. So here's the thing. PTSD treatment, it affects our lives and it affects our relationships with ourselves and with others. So not everyone's comfortable with being wrong. And I'll just own that one on my own. I don't like being wrong. I'm not a fan of change. Who is? Not everyone is comfortable, though, with being wrong. And we might discover in treatment that we've been unfair to ourselves. We've made unfair assumptions of ourselves or others that are just not correct. We might need to make amends. Ouch. And we might need to forgive. So the reason that we ask the big 2 questions, friends, is this. There is no therapist. There is no research. There is no quirky Facebook Live class. There is no thing. There is no one outside of ourselves that can convince us that something is true when we very fundamentally believe that it's not. So I'm going to say that again for the folks in the back. The reason we ask the big 2 questions, no therapist, no research, no one, and no thing outside of ourselves can convince us something is true when we very fundamentally believe it is not. That is science. If we do not believe change is possible, we're right. Okay. And if we don't want to change, engaging in therapy is pretty much a waste of our time. I know that is sounding harsh, but we need to get real about that. There are a lot of reasons why service members, why veterans, why we go to therapy, even if we answer no to the big 2 questions. So maybe we promised a spouse that we would do it, or we got command directed, or it's part of our probation. So not everyone who has PTSD or has moral injury believes change is possible, and not everybody wants to change. And let's get real. That is okay. I say again, that is okay. I don't have any judgment for that because I get it. Okay. Now, let's address some elephants in the room here. Maybe your spouse or friend or you're a fellow service member and you're here tuning into this Facebook Live class because you want to help somebody that you care about, someone you love. And the idea of your loved one not getting help is not okay with you. And here's the thing. It is okay. And I want to say this with love because it's going to hurt. So put your seatbelt on. I'm going to recommend that you stand down for your own sanity. I'm going to say this again with a lot of love. You have no control over what someone else believes. I say again, we cannot control what other people believe. We can't make someone else want to change because that's just not how life works. And I know that it feels unfair because we can see how this is affecting our loved ones and us. And I realize that this might be tearing our families apart or our unit apart. And the fact is that the only person who can change me is me. The only person who can change you is you. Now, don't feel discouraged. I'm not asking you to give up hope, okay? But here's what I need you to hear very clearly. I'm asking you to recognize that our loved ones get help when they are ready and not when we are ready. I say again, our loved ones get help when they are ready and not when we're ready, and that is okay. Now let's, since we're already in the deep, if you're already in over your head, does it really matter how much deeper you go into the ocean? Nah. All right, so let's keep addressing elephants here. There are a lot of us reading, really listening to this who are on the fence about the big two questions. And that's okay too. In fact, it is 100% okay not to feel all in. And instead, I'm going to go ahead and ask you this. Is it possible that you're stronger than you think you are? Is it possible? Here's why. Okay, fact. Trauma warps our fundamental belief systems. So it changes our belief system about ourselves, other people in the world, and it is very likely that our self-doubt is actually a symptom of our PTSD. So I'm going to go ahead and just change the big two slightly, and I'm going to ask you, have you ever done something before that was hard or you thought it was really impossible at the time? Is it possible? Just is it possible that your belief system might be undermining your attempt to make meaningful change? Would you be willing to try and see if you're stronger than you think you are? Okay. Is it possible that you're wrong? Ouch. Okay, lastly. Oh, I love that elephant that Katie found. Lastly, I need to introduce this big elephant in the room. There are a lot of us who are listening to this here who don't believe that we deserve to recover, okay? So in counseling literally hundreds of service members and veterans, I know that this belief is not an outlier. So whenever there's an elephant in the room, we have to introduce it. So here's what we know. Moral injury is soul damage. We remember that when we can't talk about what happened, we often resort to punishing ourselves. And sometimes this self-punishment comes in the form of choosing not to get the treatment we need to really, no joke, reclaim our lives. We can tell ourselves that we don't deserve to have a life. We don't deserve to recover because of what we think we did, what we think we didn't do, what we think we let happen. We may feel survivor's guilt. We might tell ourselves that we don't deserve to get better or that we are responsible for what happened. And what I need to ask you is it possible that you're wrong? No joke. Is it possible that you are wrong? Now, friends, if you believe that it's easy to go through this, you might be wrong. I understand that there is an existential desire to punish ourselves. I get it. But let's make sure it is for the right thing. Let's get real. Is it possible that you're not a war criminal and you're just an asshole? You're just a jerk. Is it possible that your loved one, that the person who died, wouldn't want you to keep punishing yourself for what happened? Is it possible? Is it possible that there are second and third order effects that maybe you are just not seeing here? Is it possible that you just don't have a really objective third person perspective on this? All right, friend. So it's very likely that you're just not seeing this for what it is, and you're not seeing, and it's really hard for any of us to see our own experience from an objective third person perspective. And if you believe you don't deserve to get better, that's okay. It's okay. But I'm going to go ahead and challenge you to verify this by seeking the truth. Go ahead, get treatment, and then make an informed decision. And if you're still hopped up on punishing yourself afterwards, at least you know why. But here's the thing. Getting treatment is not easy. I want to be very clear about that. It's not the easy way. And we need to really remember that PTSD treatment really is looking into the belly of the beast. It is the exact opposite of choosing not to take responsibility. In fact, getting PTSD treatment really, it's cue course for your soul. So here's the thing we know is that the truth will set you free. And in my experience in working with veterans, with service members, with other veterans, it's just often it's not, the truth sets us free, but not in the way that we expect. All right, team. So I want to take a minute here and I want to take a deep breath because we've gone fast and furious. And, I told you we would take 10 minutes. That was a blasphemous lie, but it is what it is. And so I want to go ahead and take a deep breath. I want to pause. And I'm going to go ahead and make this attempt to get back on the screen so we can talk about this and I can answer some questions for you if you have any. So, all right. So this is the no judgment portion of our presentation as I try to get back and see you again. No. All right, we're going to try to hit. Oh, and there I am. Okay. So I'm seeing a question here. Can we address why people may feel that the treatment is the easy way out? Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for that question. A lot of things happen in war. People die. There are war crimes. Civilians die. There's a lot of bad shit that goes down. Can we just get real about that? War is ugly. And sometimes we can feel like getting treatment, that when we get treatment, it means that we're kind of giving ourselves permission that like what I did was okay. Like, let's say there's something out there that I did or didn't do. And I feel really awful about that. Maybe, by getting treatment, I can tell myself, well, then what I did was okay. Then my buddy dying, all right, it's okay. It's like, oh, I'll just go ahead and forgive myself. And that is not the case. That's not the case. So when we're going through PTSD treatment, what we're doing is we're kind of right-sizing our experience for what it's like back home. We're looking at our experience from a more objective third-person perspective. PTSD treatment is tough. And a lot of times, forgiveness is tough. Let's talk about forgiveness for a minute, because that is a super loaded term, especially for those of us who have survived any manner of trauma. Sometimes there is a message out there that that we are not going to be able to recover if we can't forgive our attacker or our abuser or our rapist. And And it feels like we're putting a condition on that. And from a therapeutic perspective, I think I'll just go out on a limb and say maybe, forgiveness is a little overrated in that sense. And I don't think, and I hate the message that comes out. And this is what I have a lot of clients come into the therapeutic environment, and they're like, well, I can't forgive the person who attacked me, or the person who killed my family member, or the person who did XYZ or ABC. Therefore, I do not deserve to recover. It's kind of caught up in maybe, a misaligned dogma or these ideas. And I just want to challenge that. I really want to challenge that. We can recover from PTSD. And it doesn't necessarily mean that what we did was okay, what we didn't do was okay. Going through PTSD treatment doesn't magically erase our experience. That's a question that I very often get, especially from clients who are veterans of the Vietnam era. Going through PTSD treatment is not going to erase our memories of our trauma. I wish it would, but that's not a thing. What it helps us to do is to look at it from a more objective third-person perspective. And what I would tell you is, you just remind me what you've got to lose by getting treatment. So the D in PTSD stands for disorder. And I don't want to belabor the point, but so disorder is a word that a lot of people take offense to, and they're like, I'm not disordered. I'm like, calm down. Just calm down. So disorders, it's a technical word. And it just means that our symptoms, our PTSD symptoms, are getting in the way of our no kidding, walking, talking, everyday life. That's all that means. It is not a word that comes with a lot of judgment. So when we are disordered, we can't really enjoy our life. We can't resume our roles. We can't be the spouse that we want to be. We can't be the parent we want to be. We can't be the friend we want to be. We can't support and love people the way that we want to. And that is tough. And so when we get PTSD treatment, the goal is to reduce those symptoms so that we can resume our walking, talking, everyday life, so that we can go to our kids' baseball games, so that we can really be present with our spouse, so that we can get rid of this numb feeling and reclaim our lives again. And when we reduce our symptoms, that doesn't erase our past. It doesn't make everything okay. And I hope that wasn't just a really long explanation that confused you further. But if it did, please put it in the chat box, because I'm wrong all the time and I explain things crappy a lot. And my goal is to answer your questions. So bring it. All right. Another question we have: what are some common fears that people may have with finding treatment? Dang. Lots of fears. I think the biggest fear is what's going to happen if I have to talk about my trauma. What if I kind of let the genie out of the bottle? What if it's Pandora's box? And, I've been working so hard to avoid my symptoms, maybe with drugs or alcohol, maybe with overworking, maybe with anything, really avoidance takes many forms. What happens if I quit avoiding this and I actually look at this? Is it possible that I could start crying and never stop? Is it possible that this is just really going to mess me up, that I will actually be worse than when I first started? And so let's talk about that for a minute. That's a legitimate fear, especially because those of us who have been living with PTSD for maybe years. So I'm talking to you, my Vietnam era vets, especially. Folks who have been seeing Charlie in the Foxhole the last 50 years. It's very likely, and I'll just own this myself, because I know this is none of you, but when it comes to avoidance, if avoidance were a sport, I would probably be vying for a spot on the U.S. national team. Like, folks with PTSD are awesome at avoiding. So what happens when we take away that avoidance? Can I survive without my avoidance? Can I survive without drugs or alcohol? Is my life worth living? And when we start PTSD treatments, and we're going to talk about evidence-based treatments in the next section, how to, no kidding, find a therapist who can help us. What we know is that, yeah, when we first look at this, it's going to be tough. But this is why it's important to be with a therapist who is a no kidding expert on PTSD and moral injury, somebody who works with this. You're not going to be doing this. You're not going out alone and unafraid, okay? So you're going to be with a no-joke therapist who is going to give you breathing techniques. And I know there's nothing more annoying, I'll just speak from personal experience, than having a panic attack or, really being in a bad space and someone going, just breathe. It's just like, I just want to smack you. But here's the thing. I'm sorry. And I see kind of a follow-up question. It's the fear of telling the story over and over again to new people for many reasons. We don't want to retell the story. They don't understand being a big one. Yeah, this can be really tough. Especially if we don't find a good therapist the first time. It's important to find somebody the first time that we can talk to and stick with. Because there's nothing worse than finding a treatment that just doesn't work and then having to go back to the drawing board. That's really frustrating. So with the evidence-based treatments, what we know is that, yeah, we will be talking about our trauma to some degree, or thinking about it to some degree. But your therapist will be giving you tools to deal with that. So you're not going to be alone and unafraid. This evidence-based treatments have really great coping mechanisms built in to help you. So let's talk about finding, having to retell our story over and over again. I want to thank you, Kimberly, for asking that question. Yeah, it's really important that we find a no-joke expert to help us with our PTSD. And I want to kind of use an absurd example for a minute. I'm going to be hyperbolic on purpose for a minute. Let's say you go to, I'm screwing around. I'm hanging my Christmas lights before Thanksgiving, which I would never do. Calm down. And I fall off my ladder because karma, and I break my arm. Okay, my arm is off in like some wonky direction. Okay, now let's say I go to the hospital. I go to the emergency room, and I have a first-year resident. And MDs, don't send me strongly worded emails. This is a hyperbolic example, so calm down. And I see a first-year resident who has never seen a broken bone before. Never seen it. I'm like, what is that? I don't know what's going on. They take a look, and they're just like, wow. Not really sure what that is, but in my experience, everybody who goes and sees the chiropractor feels better because chiropractors are awesome. You get a little massage and you feel better. So we are going to send you, instead of resetting the arm, we're not really sure what this is, so we're going to go ahead and send you to the chiropractor. And we go to the chiropractor, and very likely, chiropractors are great. It's going to feel awesome. But here's the problem with that. Our arm's still broken. Our arm is still broken. And any of you who've ever had a broken arm and then had to go back, the process is really kind of gruesome. The arm has to, because the arm heals in a broken way. And the physical bone, it has to be rebroken and reset, and it's tough. But what happens is, we can have this other treatment that feels good maybe in the here and now, because going to a chiropractor is great, but my arm is still broken. So I might have to go back. Well, I will have to go back to the hospital and get that reset. And a lot of times that happens with trauma. It happens with trauma. We'll go into the therapeutic environment. We'll see a therapist, and maybe the therapist is not trained in an evidence-based treatment for trauma, which happens. It's not uncommon. Or they specialize in something else. When the only tool we have is a hammer, everything starts looking like a nail. And so, we might do just regular talk therapy. We might, get medication that really helps with our symptoms. But at the end of the day, we're going to have to go back and get that arm reset. And so what I'm going to encourage, and to really address that last question, I'm going to encourage us to see a no-kidding PTSD specialist, somebody who specializes in PTSD. This is what they do day in, day out, so that we can avoid having to go back and having our arm rebroken. So, okay, and great question here. How much does the social stigma of seeking treatment play into the avoidance of treatment for PTSD? Oh, stigma, my friend. Oh, yeah, there's a lot of stigma going on. Thank you for that question. When it comes to PTSD, there are so many rumors about PTSD that are absolutely not true, but absolutely will screw with our head. And the number one thing that I hear in the therapeutic environment is, I don't deserve to have PTSD, or only military people can have PTSD. And even within the military, we can break this down further. This gets even more granular. So I hear from military folks, well, I don't deserve to have PTSD because I wasn't a door knocker, I wasn't a bell ringer, I wasn't a trigger puller. I only was on the base, or I was only assaulted. And I'm being hyperbolic on purpose, because these are the things that make me go, oh shit. Like, wow. Okay, this is for real. So let's have some real talk about stigma and PTSD for a minute. Okay, so, and especially this idea of not deserving to have PTSD. So I don't deserve to have the flu. Or in this, I don't deserve to have the COVID. Okay, I'm really nice. I'm a nice lady. Hashtag nice lady. I don't deserve to have the COVID. I help people with PTSD. I've got a big dog I take care of. I'm really nice. But here's the thing. Flu doesn't give a shit about that. Flu does not care. COVID doesn't care. HIV doesn't care. Schizophrenia doesn't care. There are all sorts of things that do not care whether I deserve or not. There's no deserving to have PTSD. So PTSD is something that happens to you, not something that is wrong with you. I say again, PTSD is something that happens to you. It is not something wrong with you. So PTSD, trauma is defined by the DSM. So that's the Diagnostic Statistical Manual version 5, has to be version 5. That's that big ass purple book that you see on your therapist bookshelf. It defines trauma as actual or threatened exposure to death, serious injury, or sexual violence. That is a huge umbrella, friends. That is a huge umbrella. There are a lot of things that cause trauma. And if Me Too has taught us nothing else, it has definitely taught us that literally we can't go through life without either having personally experienced a traumatic event or personally knowing someone who has. Trauma is something that happens to you. It is not something wrong with you. And we absolutely can recover it. No, there's no special protected class of trauma recipients. And while we're on that topic, let's get a little more uncomfortable and talk about trauma comparison. So trauma comparison is shitty, and you're shitty if you do it. Let's just be clear about that. You're shitty if you do it, and if you do it, stop. I say again, stop. Now, I'm not saying that so trauma comparison is the equivalent of my trauma is more traumatic than your trauma. So let's talk about this. So when I'm talking with clients or maybe I've got a group of survivors of intimate partner violence, what we used to call domestic violence, things that I'm not going to hear is, well, you think your spouse beat you up? My spouse sent me to the hospital 3 times. Oh yeah? Well, I had stitches it's that trauma comparison. It's pretty messed up. Now, before you write me a strongly worded email, press pause, calm down. I'm not saying that people who engage in trauma comparison are being intentionally malicious. There's a lot of gaslighting that goes on in mental health and in medicine, especially if you're a woman, if you're of color, and if you identify as a member of the queer community. Let's just get real about that. That is a thing. So I am not saying that there is any intentional malice behind people who trauma compare. But what I am saying is that there are very unintended second and third order effects when we trauma compare. And I hear a lot of this in the military community. I'm talking to you. Okay. So, you only went to Iraq. I went to Iraq and Afghanistan. Well, you got blown up once. I got blown up 3 times. So the unexpected and unintended second, third order effects are, number one, it makes other people feel belittled, dismissed, and most importantly, it keeps them from getting the help that they deserve to have a full comeback. So if you are comparing your trauma, I'm gonna encourage you with love. Stop it. Stop it. There is no deserving of PTSD, and everybody deserves to get the help they need to have a no-joke comeback. Thank you for the questions. Any alibis? Okay. Seeing no others, I'm going to move on to the second part of our presentation where we're going to talk about how to, no kidding, get a therapist for PTSD. So again, we're going back into the no judgment part where I try to work with the technology. Calm down. Calm down. All right. Okay. Share screen. Oh, Jesus. All right. Here's my screen. Here's my share. Okay, scary share. Don't worry. I got you. Bam. Not so scary share. There we go. Okay. So moving on. So for this section, we're going to get right down to brass tacks. We're going to talk about how to find a therapist and the need to find a no kidding specialist, what we can expect and what the challenges are. Okay, so we're going to go through some basics on this. Well, I say basics, but they're not so basic because if we've never been in therapy before, this is super intimidating. Okay, so how do I find somebody to help me? Once we understand what PTSD is, and we understand those evidence-based treatments, we need to find a partner to help us to create and execute a no-kidding plan of action. All right. So when we are ready to get help, we have to have a no-kidding sit-down with a mental health professional. And let's be real, it takes time, it takes effort. And again, we have to choose. I say again, we have to choose to be radically authentic with our provider. Not easy. Okay, now let's get real. I understand that a lot of us don't really relish the idea of going to therapy. And I want to be specific. So the terms therapy and counseling, these are pretty interchangeable. So don't get wrapped around the axle on that. So we might have the idea that we'll have to lie down on a couch, talk about our mommy issues, or we might legit think that, therapies for crazy people. And also in certain subcultures, therapy is not really accepted. And it is what it is. So obviously, we would really prefer to do it on our own rather than find a therapist. In fact, that is the number one fantasy that I hear is, Virginia, I just want to, I want to get a book and, I'll get PT, I'm going to get help for PTSD, but I really want to do it on my own. And so that's not a thing. That is not a thing. So we do not heal in isolation. We heal in community, and we can't really do evidence-based treatments on our own, even if we're a therapist. Okay. So obviously we prefer to do it on our own, but there is really value in not being alone and unafraid and working with a no kidding licensed mental health professional. First of all, it's really valuable to get feedback from someone who can provide an objective third-person perspective. Now, a therapist is going to be 100% on our side, and they sincerely want what is best for us. Moreover, let's talk about this. Our therapist isn't our friend. Our therapist isn't our friend, and that's actually a good thing because a therapist can tell us what we need to hear and not so much what we want to hear. So our therapist is not always going to agree with us and will often challenge our understanding. They're going to point out negative self-talk and ask us the tough questions that we would not be asking ourselves. A good therapist could really kick your emotional ass, and that's not a bad thing. Now, again, we're therapists, generic term for somebody who conducts therapy with clients. Okay, so a lot of mental health professionals fall into this category. We've got all the different flavors listed here. So if possible, here's what I recommend. Find a licensed, I say again, licensed mental health professional with specialized training in treating PTSD. So a specialist and not a generalist. And I know it sounds like I'm being mean to the therapeutic community, but I want to go ahead and talk a little more about this. So when someone has cancer, they don't go to their family doctor for treatment. They go to an oncologist, someone who, no joke, specializes in cancer. And the reason for this is pretty simple, because cancer can kill you. Cancer can kill you. PTSD can kill you. When our life is on the line, we want the best treatment possible. And the same is true for mental health. So therapists tend to specialize in specific treatment methods or specific client populations. So for example, I focus on combat-related PTSD and moral injury. And I'm sort of a one-trick pony. So I can do other things, but if I'm being honest, it's just not what I'm good at. And thank God I am part of an amazing community of colleagues who specialize in all manners of mental health disorders, so eating disorders or adolescent issues, depression, anxiety, you name it. And if you come into my office or into my Zoom room with an experience that's really better addressed with one of my colleagues, I'm going to go ahead and send you to them. Because your relationship with your therapist and getting the help you need is a lot more important than my ego. And if we're being honest and for real, there is never going to be any shortage of folks who need help for trauma or for depression or anxiety. We are living in really tough times, friends. Okay. So finding a therapist who specializes in PTSD and has training in an evidence-based treatment for PTSD is smart. And it's not always easy. Oh man alive. I'm going to get a drink of water. Hang one. Oh, thank goodness. Katie, thank you for reminding me to have this bottle here. So let's move on. So to find a specialist. And a lot of this is going to be for the military community, but I'll let you know, we're going to branch out a bit. To find a specialist, again, a PTSD specialist and not a generalist, we can go to Military One Source. We've got their little logo up here. We can look up providers on our health insurance website. We can use our company's EAP program. So we're going to talk a little bit more about employee assistance programs because they're really underused. We can also find therapists on the internet, just go to Dr. Google by searching for the name of the evidence-based treatment and then put in your zip code. So I put the names of the evidence-based treatments here so that you have them. So there are 3 evidence-based treatments for PTSD that are approved by the Department of Veteran Affairs. So because they're approved by the VA, so the VA is a monster. It is a monstrous bureaucracy, and I hope I'm not hurting any feelings by pointing that one out. And so an evidence-based treatment means that it works for most people most of the time. It has been, so evidence-based treatments are tested in the same way like drugs are tested for the FDA. I must say FBI, that's not a thing, I hope. But for the FDA, so it's, we're testing this on we're testing these therapy methods literally on thousands of people over the course of sometimes decades. And what we know is they work for most people most of the time. So when something is considered an evidence-based treatment, it's kind of a big deal. And for these three to be approved by the VA is kind of a big deal because it means they're ubiquitous. We can find these three evidence-based treatments: prolonged exposure therapy, cognitive processing therapy, and EMDR. Oh, that should say desensitization. I think I got my healthy vet thing kind of blocked that out, but EMDR, just put in EMDR. You can find these online. You can do EMDR, McAllen, Texas 78501, and you can find all of the EMDR specialists who are here in the Rio Grande Valley. But these evidence-based treatments, because these three, they're not the only evidence-based treatments. I want to be super clear on that. There are more. But because these are endorsed by the VA and approved by the VA, you can find them at your VA, in theory, but you can pretty much find them everywhere. It's just a matter of searching. I'm also going to encourage you to do a Psychology Today search. And this is especially helpful when I'm trying to help people find therapists within their health insurance network, because you can actually sort by that using Psychology Today. So if you're taking notes, I'm going to encourage you to write these three down. So prolonged exposure therapy, cognitive processing therapy, and EMDR. I'm going to encourage you to ask for these by name because they work for most people most of the time, pretty easy to find. More water here. I want to take a minute to talk to you about telehealth options. Let's say you live in a remote area. So the pandemic wasn't all that bad when it comes to access to mental health. Calm down. So what happened with the pandemic is we ended up having a lot more telehealth options, and that is awesome. So you can find somebody who is licensed in your state. And the data are very clear that doing an evidence-based treatment online is just as effective as doing it in person. Sure, we have our preferences, but if we're out, in the wild blue yonder, if we're someplace remote, we might not have a lot of choices. So thankfully, telehealth options are available. So once we find a therapist, what we can do is call them, request a consultation with them. Now, let's have some real talk. Let's keep in mind that you can call and leave messages with lots of providers and only hear back from a few. And in general, therapists, we're just pretty crappy this way. It is what it is. So and hopefully folks will be giving you a call back. So when they talk to you, when they call back, here's a little script that we can do. We can briefly explain why we're seeking therapy. I say again, briefly. You don't have to tell them your trauma. You are just think of it as speed dating. You're just trying them on for size. So you're going to briefly tell them why you're wanting therapy. Ask them, hey, what experience do you have treating clients like me? And then ask them if they are trained in an evidence-based treatment for PTSD or moral injury. Now, let's say that they are not trained in an evidence-based treatment. Here's the thing. Therapists, we all hang out together. Not a lot of other people will hang out with us. So we all we tend to hang out in groups. And so any therapist worth their weight in piss knows all the other therapists in their area. We all hang out together. We all know each other. We're all in the same professional network. So if they don't have the training in an evidence-based treatment, just ask them, hey, can you recommend somebody who does? So this initial consultation it's short, sweet, and to the point. It might sound something like this. So, hi therapist, my name's Virginia. I was in the military. I experienced some bad stuff when I was on a deployment in Afghanistan. And so I'm wondering what experience you have treating soldiers like me. What type of treatment do you use for PTSD or for moral injury? And again, don't be afraid to ask. All right. So let's talk about the first appointment. And let's get real. It's all right to feel nervous. In fact, you're probably going to feel nervous. So this is kind of like a first date. You are getting to know the therapist. They're getting to know you. You're trying to see, is this a good fit? So this is just a step beyond just that quick phone consultation. So the first session is often called an intake. And the intake can cause a lot of frustration with folks who are new to therapy. And I'll tell you why. So a lot of times we will have folks fill out a ton of paperwork. We're having you sign release forms, HIPAA statement. We're asking you to write about your experience, things with doctors, you name it. And it's a lot of work. And then you'll get to the first session and we're going to be going through all of that again. And that can feel super frustrating. But I promise you that there is a method to the madness. So with the intake, this is your chance for your therapist to really ask you to clarify what you've written down, talk about your treatment goals. Sometimes what we write down on an intake form isn't exactly what we're experiencing. So they can get that background information. Big thing we want to do is we want to screen for suicide. If you're feeling like you want to hurt yourself or somebody else, maybe it's more appropriate to go to the emergency room, get inpatient care. That's care where you are going to a specific treatment facility and you stay overnight. You don't go home. We're going to be doing those clinical measures. So there's a lot of tests. We want to get some idea of kind of where you are. We want to talk about confidentiality. And especially for folks who specialize in military-related combat, who work with war crimes, we're going to be talking a lot about confidentiality, what it covers, what it doesn't cover, and what is going to be going into your records, because you have a right to know. And more importantly, you and your therapist together are going to be coming up with a plan of action. You're going to be at the end of your first session. You should feel confident that, okay, I get them, they get me, and we have a plan to make this work. So this is kind of a get to know you first session. Now, not trying to be ugly, but let's be honest about this, okay? Not all therapists are compatible with all clients, and that is okay. I say again, that's okay. So for example, I realize that I personally, Virginia, am not the right therapist for most clients, okay? For most clients. So my personality can be pretty blunt. I'm not cool. And my words are kind of inelegant a lot of the time. It is what it is. It works for some clients. It doesn't work for others. And that is okay. And the reason for this is because the relationship between a client and their therapist is a lot more important than my ego. That therapeutic relationship, that sense of trust with a therapist is so important. We have to have a strong therapeutic relationship because we as clients have to choose to be authentic in order to improve. This is hard. And, not to be ugly, but some therapists are just not good at their jobs. It is what it is. So if you don't click with your therapist, it's not necessarily you. Keep looking. Find someone that you are comfortable with. Having a therapist that you can trust is unbelievably important cornerstone of our social support network. It is absolutely vital to our recovery. Now, let's say that that we're going to several specialists with PTSD and we always find a reason to not click with them. Problem might not be the therapist, might be us. Little insight goes a long way, but here's the thing. Might not be you. It might be. So just play that one by ear. But it's not unusual to have to go through a couple therapists to find the right person. And in that first session, if you're not clicking for whatever reason, let's say the therapist reminds you of your mom. That's not going to work if you had a bad relationship with your mother. Let's say that you're looking for someone who is closer to your age, who speaks your language, literally, who can conduct bilingual sessions, somebody who understands you, someone who is part of your community. It's totally okay. And don't be afraid to ask your therapist and just to say, listen, I don't think this is working out. I don't sense a click. Be honest with them. Talk with them. Because at least for me, I'll speak personally. I am much more interested in my clients having a good fit than I am in getting payment. Because here's the deal. Nobody becomes a therapist for the money or the fame, because that would be stupid. That's not a thing. So we are very, therapists, we're out here to save the world. And we do that one client at a time. So don't be afraid to talk with your therapist about that. All right. Brass tacks. If you are tuning in from the US, this is terrifying. Okay, what if I don't have health insurance? There we go. So for folks who are veterans, I'm going to encourage you to talk to a veteran service officer. So that would be, you can just do a Google search for veteran service officer in your area and sign up for VA health benefits. Once you sign up, you're in. But there are a lot of folks who do not want to go to the VA or are VA clients, and for whatever reason, it's just not working. And so I want to take a minute to talk about alternatives and some things that would help you if you're not a veteran. All right. So I want to take a minute to talk about the vet center. We have one here in McAllen, Texas, that is just kick-ass. They're amazing. And the more I learn about the vet centers across the U.S., the more I am convinced that they are the VA's best kept secret. So for the most part, for example, the one at the VA, sorry, I misspoke. The vet center here in McAllen, it's all staffed by combat vets. And they are badass. These are some amazing therapists and amazing people. So you don't have to do a lot of translating. So you're not going to have to translate from, Marine Corps to English or Army to English. The folks who work there for the most part are also combat vets and can pick up what you're putting down. In order to have service at the vet center, you only need your DD-214. There is no service connection, so you don't have to be enrolled at the VA in order to, or be service connected in order to get help. The status of your discharge doesn't matter at the VA. So if you have a bad conduct discharge, if you have bad, a dishonorable, honorable, under honorable conditions, if you have something other than an honorable discharge, this is the place for you. And they do great work. The services are free of cost. Best thing I think that VAs do and that vet centers rather do is they offer marriage and family therapy. For a lot of vet centers, and you're going to have to ask specifically and go to vetcenter.va.gov to find the one near you. They also offer individual one-on-one therapy for spouses and family members, so your kids. And that's not something that the VA does by and large. So that's a really awesome resource. There are nonprofit organizations that are amazing that can help you. And this is not an exhaustive list. These are just two of my faves that I often refer clients to. So the Cohen Veterans Network, pretty incredible. Check out their website. Again, anybody who has been enrolled. Doesn't matter your discharge status, and it's not affiliated with the VA. So the vet center is affiliated with the VA. However, the folks at the VA are not able to see the clinical notes of people at the vet center, which is a pretty big deal and pretty amazing. So very often I will send folks to the vet center if they are worried about security clearances and the like. Give an hour, pretty amazing. What they do, it's a website, and they will match veterans with clinicians. So this is a really wonderful way to get help through telehealth. And again, if you open up the aperture and look for somebody in your state versus somebody in your town, it's highly likely that you're going to be able to find somebody. Again, great nonprofit organizations not affiliated with the VA who are just really passionate about helping veterans. Okay. Employee assistance programs. So I didn't know a lot about employee assistance programs until I worked for one a couple years back. I had a little part-time gig that I dug. And it turns out that every job I have ever had in my life, and I didn't know that, had an EAP program that was available to me. So it's one of the most underutilized work benefits by and large. So these are available. It's probably part of your work benefits. They're available for folks who work part-time or full-time, part of many benefits packages. They offer short-term counseling for the employees and often for family members, or in many cases, and it depends on your EAP, household members. So it could be a roommate, a significant other. You don't have to necessarily be married to that person. EAPs very often, and the one I worked with was available 24/7. They had a 24/7 800 number that you could call anytime and talk with a licensed mental health professional. Pretty amazing. So they tend to be user friendly, and the EAP counselors might go ahead and set you up with an appointment, which really is a lot easier than slogging through your insurance benefits. Also, Department of Health and Human Services at your county or state level. Social workers, mental health professionals, if we're being honest, will just tell you that social workers are just smarter than the rest of us, especially when it comes to finding resources. Social workers are the ultimate glue in mental health. Their job is to know people and know things. They're terrifyingly smart. And if you go into every hospital has a social worker, every government agency has a social worker. If you're really stuck, talk to a social worker. And I'm just talking out of personal experience. I'm not a social worker because I wasn't smart enough when I went to grad school. And if I had a do-over, that's what I would do. When I'm stuck, I go ask a social worker because they always seem to know what to do. So for example, a couple months ago, I had a client who needed to go inpatient. So they were, had PTSD, needed to go into the inpatient environment, had two extremely large dogs who needed fostering for 28 days while they went to rehab. And after, trying for weeks to make that happen, it just didn't work. I asked a social worker, which I should have done right off the bat, and they found me someone within the hour. Now, brass tacks, okay? We can't help you if you schwack yourself. There's no coming back from that. That is a very permanent solution. In an emergency, if you are feeling suicidal, call the crisis line. The Veterans Crisis Line, I'm going to be honest with you, I've called them before. I have found them to be very helpful. You don't have to be standing on a bridge and getting ready to jump to call the crisis line. So for veterans, you dial 1. This is also available for non-veterans. So this is what comes under another name that I can't remember. But you don't have to be on a bridge getting ready to jump off to call the crisis line. Call them. Call them. If you just need someone to talk to, you need help calming down. Also, EAP programs often provide crisis intervention counseling on the spot. wonderful resources that are available. When I've called the Veterans Crisis Line, I have often found that the people working there are veterans themselves and are extremely helpful. But if you are feeling like you're going to hurt yourself and you don't have time to call someone, call 911. We will find you. Go to the emergency room. Don't hesitate. Don't hesitate, because there is no coming back from that. All right. So this is our second pause, and I am going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to go, or I think I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to try to stop sharing my screen. Oh, escape. Hold on. Escape here. Oh, and there I am. Okay. So we're at 30 minutes. Oh, my wonderful Katie. I was shout out to Katie Salidas and Nicole Tribbett, who are just the two most just amazing human beings ever. And Barbie McRae, who is going through some stuff, and just send so much love to her today. We have an incredible team here of true believers, and I'm so, so thankful for them. And thank you so much. Thank you so much for your help, both of you. So let's see. It got an excellent share that speaks to the importance of social support or lack thereof during treatment. Oh, that's cool. Oh, so nice. I'll go ahead and read this out loud because why not? So from Kent, I didn't worry about the stigma about seeking treatment for PTSD. I knew I needed it, especially after a near fatal traffic accident. Oof. And went well over 20 years as a patrol officer and detective working homicides. Evolved into EMDR, awesome evidence-based treatment. Yes. And without any help from my supposed loving wife. Oh, sorry, brother. The only thing she would do is complain about how expensive it was after insurance. Legit. Long story short, I'm back to policing and divorce. Ooh, good for you, Kent. And divorcing the baggage. You go. And I'm sorry I can't see the rest of your comment, because, well, it doesn't mean it's not there. It just means I can't see it because I'm not savvy enough to do so. Man, thank you for sharing that. I'm sorry you're divorcing. Divorce sucks. It's really hard, but it sounds like this is a really good decision for you. You absolutely deserve to come back from this. Oh, thank you. Best way to get past the PTSD is talk to someone who isn't going to judge you. Check. Rather get to the root of the problem and start getting you back to becoming the best or better version of you. Therapist needs to be real and not sugarcoat anything. Got to be truthful and trustful. You want to communicate. Thank you so much for sharing that, Kent. I really value you choosing to really share yourself here, because if we can't help if we can't talk about that here, if we can't talk about it with each other, where can we? Thank you for making the choice to be authentic here on this platform and to share your experience with others. Sharing your experience, your strength, your hope with other folks is, we absolutely can come back from this. And I'll just speak for myself. If I can come back from PTSD, anyone can. You absolutely can do this. So, my personal story, I don't have a really cool origin story. But nobody grows up and says, no one when they were kids like, oh, I want to be a trauma therapist when I grow up. I hope. And if your kids do, they need a therapist. Don't send them to me. I don't do kids. But hour 10 minutes. Oh my gosh. So sorry, team. So if we get cut off, we get cut off. Thanks, Katie, for being my Big Ben, for being my timer. When it comes to PTSD, after my third deployment to Iraq, I was living in Germany, and I gotten kind of had an episode at work. I'll just put it like that. And I got command directed to go to the base psychiatrist. Ouch. So I went and I talked to a psychiatrist who was a service member, military service member. This was in 2008, and poured my heart out. Jeez Louise, poured my heart out for almost 50 minutes. And then at the end of that time, he looked right at me. He said, Virginia, I can tell you're really hurting, and I'd love to help you, but I can't help you if you don't choose to be honest with me. I was like, excuse me? And then he clarified. He said, I'd love to help you, but we all know that women don't serve in combat. So I wish I was making that up. I was in a really bad place when I went to that psychiatrist. I was not okay. I was suicidal. I was blowing up my perfectly great relationships. I was drinking like a fish, even unusual by European standards. It was not okay. And I had people who I love and really respect talking to me and saying, "Ooh, girl, you need some help." And after that experience, I became even more suicidal and more not okay. And it was at that moment that I realized that if I don't figure this out, I'm gonna kill myself. I'm gonna literally die from this. Either whatever is going on in my brain is going to kill me because I wasn't really sure what it was, or I'm gonna schwack myself. And it was at that moment that I was like, "Oh crap! I better figure this out." And so I enrolled in school because I'm good at school. And here I am, 14 years later, yapping with all y'all. And what a privilege! What an absolute privilege! But I say all that to say this: not everybody is great at their job, and my experience is not a one-off. I don't know if you noticed, but I'm female. I'm a cisgender female. So, gaslighting happens in mental health, especially if you're female, especially if you're queer, especially if you're a person of color. This is not okay. This is absolutely not okay. But unfortunately, this happens a lot. And again, the unintended second and third order effects are devastating, absolutely devastating, and not okay. So please be aware that if you're not getting the help that you deserve, please go elsewhere. Please keep looking. Please don't give up. Also want to give you guys a freebie since you stuck it out. We're going to reward you with a freebie. Go to thesoldiersguide.com, www.thesoldiersguide.com. You can download a free preview copy of the book. It's going to give you the first couple chapters of The Soldier's Guide to PTSD. And that goes over what PTSD isn't, so rumors that aren't true but will mess with you, and what PTSD is. So you can line by line go through your symptoms and really right size, and know more. We've got to know more about our symptoms than anyone, unfortunately, if we're going to come back from this. You can get a free copy of our workbook. So we have a workbook. Oh, Katie's amazing. thesoldiersblog.com. You can get a free copy of our workbook, which you can go ahead and print out. Bring it to your C&P exam, your compensation and pension exam. Bring it to your therapist. Just want to thank you. Thank you all for hanging with me. We went over an hour. It is what it is. Thank you for sticking with me. I will stick around for questions, but otherwise we will conclude this. Oh, thank you, Kimberly Gardner Rose. Appreciate you. Thank you for the shout out. Thank you guys for tuning in. We didn't expect anyone. Well, thank you, Ken. Thank you so much. Thanks for tuning in. Thank you for being here. And thank you for caring. Thank you for caring about what we do, and just, keep sharing your experience, strength, and hope with others because it's needed. All right. No alibi. So seeing no others, I'm going to call it a day. Team, thank you so much. And we'll talk to you soon.